Am I flashing red up there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have fancy controls. Here we go.
I will be covering the history of HR. Human resource management is much older than you probably expected. It did not start with the first supermarket or the first department store. It did not start with the first mom and pop store. It started within the evolution of the very first communes and the growth of the first ancient societies. Modern day roots in key milestones are in ancient Greece, China, Britain, and Industrial Revolution. Ancient armies created the first successful HR practices. Successful command required leaders who engaged in a shared vision, and ancient armies designed and developed the first procedures for selection of new hires and leaders. It required good organization of jobs and tasks. Sparta was a leading military society state in Greece. They designed a unique training system for highly motivated males who joined the army to protect Sparta. The army developed a developmental system for young boys in the long term that stressed a common vision and a shared mission. Ancient Chinese emperors recognized the importance of effective management. They created the first rules for government selection of employees. Officials were required to understand the laws, have the ability to read and administer the governmental and country laws effectively based on a set rules. The Chinese developed a recruitment process that defined key requirements and skills and competencies of officials and officers. The simple procedure identified talents and led to educational processes to provide the tools to manage the satisfaction of the citizens. The development training had to be approved by the emperors and all of the leaders. Britain designed and developed strategic HR procedures for the British Navy in the 16th century. The British Honourable East India Corporation ran contemporary complicated processes to identify leaders who could conquer and lead business opportunities in growing areas of the New World. The 18th century British Industrial Revolution created the foundation of large factories and modernized HR by increasing the demand for workers. The factories needed quick, inexpensive production and requested thousands of employees, but they were mostly unskilled. The factories had to create training and new people management practices. The factories not only needed the right staffing and education skills, but also discovered employee satisfaction influences productivity and performance. They introduced voluntary programs to increase satisfaction, and the government implemented new work safety legislation and laws. The 20th century brought personnel management and the first real modern HR management laws, where organizations utilized strategic relations and fundamental principles. The goal was to design cost-efficient processes to maintain market competitiveness and resulted in a different approach to employees. The change was a proper induction of new hires, detailed job gradings, and unified recruitment processes. It was responsible for full compliance to the newly introduced law requirements of implementing different social and workplace safety programs. Trade unions evolved around the same time. Organizations were required to build strategic relations with trade unions. They gave the employer a reliable partner to communicate with and develop new improvements at no significant cost. Trade unions are not as strong as they used to be, but they are still common. You can find them in a lot of industries that have been around for hundreds of years. Personnel management transformed into HR management in the 1970s. New technologies allowed growth of multinational organizations and created a new wave of globalization. Complex human resource info systems eliminated duplicate data entry and made employee info readily available for all different organizations. Human resource management progressed and started to link HR strategies with business strategies. It became inseparable to the overall business plan. The HR business model became a formalized agreement with managers for functions including compensation, benefits, and accountability. There were 4 key milestones in human resource management history. The milestones were organizing effective teams and assigning work, implementing right staffing and educational training, increasing overall productivity, and encouraging full employee engagement. Most of you have probably experienced these in your jobs right now and will be experiencing them. When HR management began, most citizens were illiterate. there was an urgent need for industries to organize people to ensure that they had the proper delivery of results. Businesses and organizations had to adapt to organizing teams with clear tasks and jobs and carefully train employees to deliver the requested results efficiently and effectively. Growing industries had to accept thousands of unskilled workers each year to sustain productivity. Their biggest challenge was training as products became more sophisticated. Industry simplified all steps to the required minimum to keep unskilled workers efficient, and they began to adapt recruitment and advertising for specialized jobs. Organizations realized they can achieve high savings if employee-related processes were centralized and managed using similar processes. Higher productivity increased profit margins and secured the market position. They invested large sums into talent management, global workforce mobility, and performance management. The last milestone was a shift in the market where the application chooses the organization. Employees did not feel engaged and they began to change jobs quickly. Organizations began to train managers to share best practices and utilize diversity to delegate tasks in order to boost employee mindsets and their attitudes to the company overall. Human resource management and its history has a direct impact on my personal life. The history ensures that my employers provide me with clear organization and job descriptions and the proper training to efficiently perform job-related tasks. I recently began training with my second job's HR department. The training is extensively spread out over 4 weeks and includes hands-on computer-based training and quizzes. So far, I've had the opportunity to work with scheduling and compensation and benefits for coordinating new hires.
So I did the current laws. The topics that I'll be discussing is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I'll be referring to as the ADA, the Affordable Care Act, which I'll refer to as the ACA, and then at the end I'll relate this all to myself. So some history. The ADA was passed in 1990 by Congress and then signed by George H.W. Bush. In 1991, different regulations were effective and issued. In 2008, the ADA Amendments Act was signed by George W. Bush to counteract the Supreme Court's narrow interpretation of disability. So what is the ADA? The ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination in jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places open to the public. This law is to make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. So the definition of a disability is the ADA defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially narrows a person's ability to participate in major life activities. Examples of physical impairment include cardiovascular, respiratory, and reproductive, and mental impairment as specific learning disabilities. So the regard as test is used when an individual does not meet the definitional requirements of a disability under the ADA but still can be protected. This usually is applied when an employee is regarded as having a disability by her employer even if the impairment is not an actual disability. So the first title pertains to employment. This is designed to help people with disabilities access the same employment opportunities and benefits available to everybody else. Employers must use reasonable accommodations to qualified applicants and employees, which I'll be discussing in later slides. This half of Title II pertains to transportation. This covers public services like city buses, public rail, transit, etc. This title states that public transport authorities may not discriminate against people with disabilities and must comply with requirements of accessibility. Title II also pertains to state and local governments. This prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities in all programs, activities, and services of public entities. This applies to all state and local governments, their departments, and their agencies. The last title is Public Accommodations and Commercial Facilities. This prohibits private places of public accommodation from discriminating against individuals with disabilities. Places are also required to take necessary steps to communicate effectively with customers with vision, hearing, and speech disabilities. So like I stated earlier, accommodations are necessary to comply with the ADA. Some examples are existing facilities made readily available for individuals with disabilities, providing sound amplification, job reconstructuring, which is allocating or redistributing the marginal function of a job. Also, part-time or modified work schedules, which is changing regular work schedules or establishing a flexible leave policy, making training manuals, and installing wheelchair ramps. All of these are acceptable and comply with the ADA. So the next I'll be talking about the Affordable Care Act, which is also known as Obamacare, which is the landmark health reform legislation with key provisions to extend coverage to millions of uninsured, implement measures that'll lower health care costs, improve system efficiency, and eliminate industry practices that include denial of coverage. So some history. On July 2009, the House Democrats unveiled a 1,000-page plan for a new system. On November 2009, the House approves of health care reform. By 2010, the Senate version of the plan is okayed by the House, and then a few days later, Obama signs the ACA into law. In June 2010, the first provisions go into effect, and September 2010, more elements go into effect, which include no lifetime money limits on coverage, dependent children allowed to stay on the coverage until age 26, and then insurers are barred from requiring co-pays to preventative care and vaccinations. So two big requirements involve employers and small business owners. Employers with 50 or more full-time employees must purchase health care insurance or face a penalty. On the other hand, small business owners receive tax incentives if they offer coverage, but must pay at least 50% of the total cost for their employees. Any individual not covered through employer's policy are legally required to purchase health care insurance or face a penalty. By 2018, any employer that offers high-end care plans more than $27,000 per year will be required to pay an additional tax. So there are some pros to the American Care Act, which is more Americans have health insurance. Insurance is more affordable. Pre-existing health conditions can no longer be denied. Lower prescription drug costs, more screenings covered, and then no time limits on care. Some cons are many people pay higher premiums, fines people face when they don't have insurance. It also increases taxes. Enrolling can be difficult. And some businesses are cutting employee hours to avoid covering employees. So I want to relate this back to myself with the ADA, specifically Title III, Public Accommodations and Commercial Facilities. So at my job, we had to get this new ATM to comply with the ADA. The next slide, I'll have some pictures of it. I don't have any to compare the old one to, but as you can see on this one, we had to get it lowered so that it was wheelchair accessible. Also, I made this larger. It's Braille for the people that are blind, and also, I didn't get a picture, but that's an audio jack for also the people that are blind so that they can use the ATM successfully. And that's it for me, and next up's Keenan.
First, let's ask ourselves, what is discrimination and how can we tell if it's happening around us? Discrimination is the unfair treatment of an individual or a group based on factors such as race, religion, sex, or disability. The three topics I'll be going over are AAP, sexual discrimination, and in-hiring discrimination. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of '64 prohibits discrimination in all aspects of employment, except in the case of a bona fide job requirement, which are attributes reasonably necessary to the normal performance of a job, such as being a certain age or gender, or having the ability to lift a certain weight. Equal Employment Opportunities Commission enforces federal laws which make it illegal to discriminate against applicants or employees listed in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and against anyone who files a complaint or charge of discrimination or participates in a discrimination investigation or lawsuit.